everyone. Well, welcome to the Easter Ross Area Committee. Thank you all for joining, particularly the officers and the others that we have along to support us and join us and inform us at the meeting. So the first thing on the agenda is a good news item that I would like to share with everyone about the SSE Sustainable Development Fund. A new round of the fund is now available. It's open across the whole of the Highlands, so groups in our Easter Ross area are now eligible to apply. This round of funding has a focus on supporting the net zero ambitions of the region. There's a £1 million fund available, and the minimum application value this time is 30,000. So they are looking to support some really substantial projects. The closing date for applications is very soon. Actually, it's quite a tight deadline. It's noon on Wednesday, the 19th of January, and the SSE team are very happy to discuss potential applications. So they're more than willing to get involved and help groups. To qualify, any application must meet one or more of the following outcomes. So it's about creating opportunities, empowering communities, and sustainable places. And then within each of those, there's a lot more detail about the types of projects that could come forward. And although they look quite big and maybe quite scary, actually when you dig down deep, there are a number of projects, I think, in both wards that could come forward that would be easier projects to apply for. So I would encourage everyone in our area to look at this in more detail, to speak to Fiona Morrison from SSE, to speak to us, the councillors and the ward manager, and see if we can support you as well in any way possible so that we can tap into this funding. So that is good news for our area. So moving on to the items on the agenda. The first one we have is the apologies, and I understand it's just Councillor Wilson.
Yes, that's right. And Councillor Monroe will be 20 minutes late.
Okay, thanks, Fiona. Item number 2 is declarations of interest. Do any members want to declare anything? Nope, there's no hands up. Okay, so I'll move on to item number 3, which is the Fire Area Performance Summary Report, which is on pages 1 to 13 of your papers. And I would like to welcome Paddy Farrell to the meeting, who's standing in for Alex McKinley. Welcome, Paddy. This is the first time you've been along to our area committee, so thank you for taking the time to come along today. We'll all have had the papers and read through the report, but if you want to highlight any key points and then take any questions from members.
Thank you very much, Councillor Robertson, and good morning, committee members. I'm Station Commander Paddy Farrell. I work as part of the management team here in Highland, and as stated, sorry, I'll be delivering the Q2 performance report this morning. First of all, if I could just direct your attention to section 3.2 within the cover note concerning our prevention and protection activities. Although COVID is still significantly affecting us on a daily basis, as it is with everyone, it has not stopped us from carrying out our engagement activities with the public. Previously, throughout the pandemic, we were only able to offer in-person home fire safety visits to high-risk and very high-risk properties. We've now expanded that, and thankfully we're now able to offer the in-person home fire safety visits to medium risk and low risk households also. And these are carried out by our RDS on-station staff and our community safety advocates. We're also still engaging with people off station, school visits, community events, and a lot of engagement activities via social media as well. Unfortunately, at the minute, though, we're not able to offer any on-station engagement activities. The reason being is we're still obviously in the stage in the pandemic where we're still key for us to protect our front line, but we are still certainly getting out there, getting our safety messages out there, engaging with the public, and engaging where we can. We have recently carried out a consultation into how we respond to UFAS incidents, so that's unwanted fire alarm signal calls. This consultation has now concluded and the data that we've received is now being analysed. And the aim of this consultation is really to inform that how we respond to UFAS incidents in future, ensuring that we're really having the best use of our resources, and if we're able to free up resources to respond to other types of incidents and also carry out other activities such as engagement activities and other home safety visits, school visits and training as well. If I could direct your attention to section 3.4 of the cover letter. The performance report shows that accidental dwelling fires, the figures have remained low and there's no accidental dwelling fires within the reporting period within Easter Ross, and also with that fire fatalities and fire casualties also remain at 0. Deliberate fires are significantly lower than the same period in the previous years, and the total number for the Easter Ross area is still low in comparison to the Greater Highland total. Our fire alarm incidents, our UFAS incidents in Q2 have gone up slightly, and our staff are continuing to engage with property holders to try and work out why those incidents are occurring and to try and prevent them from reoccurring in the future. Road traffic collisions have seen a slight increase with 6 incidents being recorded. This number of incidents remains low for the Easter Ross area, again in comparison to the Highland total. Despite these low figures, we will continue our engagement activities and continue to try and drive the figures even lower. So that's something that no matter how low the incidents go, we'll always try and get them lower. And just on the note of incident numbers, over the course of the bonfire weekend, we didn't receive a single mobilisation for Invergarden fire station. So hopefully, like to accredit that partly to our staff's engagement efforts in the area. On the subject of recruitment, we are piloting a pre-employment engagement programme in Highland, and this is really a change to our recruitment process. We've taken on board feedback from previous candidates who have gone through our recruitment process and people who have joined, or maybe people who in the past maybe have been put off or joining us as RDS firefighters. The emphasis on this pilot is to revamp our recruitment process from the time when a candidate would submit their initial application form until the time they actually join us. The aim of the process is to hopefully have all the different stages of the recruit process completed within a period of 3 months, and with a lot of the stages actually being carried out locally. So for depending on where they are, where the actual station is, previously the recruit process may have involved candidates maybe travelling from, for talk's sake, maybe Durness to Invergarden to carry out the practical selection tests. Now with this pilot, we're now able to offer those tests at a local level, so reducing the burden and the impact on candidates from taking time off their work, away from their primary employment, away from their families, to travel to an area to do their tests. We're now able to carry out those tests locally and support potential recruits at a local level and in a much shorter time frame, and then before they're actually able to start their initial training with us. That's really update from myself. I'd thank you all for listening, and I'd be happy to take any questions if any members have any questions at this time.
Great, thank you, Paddy. That was great. The report is very comprehensive anyway and very detailed, and it's a very reassuring report. I was certainly very encouraged by the figures, such low figures, which I think, as you've said, it's really down to the engagement that you've been involved in. Really good engagement has resulted in much better circumstances for everybody within the area. I particularly liked what you were talking about recruitment. Recruitment is an issue that always comes up. We've been talking about, it seems like for years in Highland Council, talking with the fire service about how better to carry that out. So it's good that you've got a much more people-focused and localised recruitment system in place, and hopefully that will result in more applications. So thank you. Councillor Finlayson had his hand up. Mike?
Yes, and thank you, Paddy, for the report. I'm wondering, Paddy, there's two issues I was just going to ask about. Are you able to expand at all on new fire regs, how up to speed things are with regard to that, regarding, the fire alarms for houses and all these sort of things? Have we got to have all linked up and all these things? Now, when you're talking about doing home visits, will that be part of the primary reason for the home visit? I know that various organisations are coming up to speed on it, but how is it in general with regard to the general population? And do we have any difficulties in our area of ever not being able to have 4 firemen per call? Is there any incidences at all where the fire engine can't go out because we've got less than 4 firemen there in our area, in our ward? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Finlayson. With regards to the fire alarms, the new legislation, I'm assuming you're meaning the Scottish Government legislation with regards to domestic fire alarms. So just what we've seen certainly is a good uptake from members of the public coming forward to us, asking for advice, and it is certainly the whole purpose of a home fire safety visit. It could be to offer. We certainly can provide smoke alarms for households who need them, either battery operated smoke alarms, standalone smoke alarms, or the new sort of interlinked alarms. But also, if anybody who maybe has fire alarms in their house, maybe but they just maybe want a bit of advice, it would anybody who gets in touch with us. It's not just about fitting fire alarms. It could be also just members of the public just wanting some advice or some reassurance. So I do know certainly we have seen a big uptick in members of the public coming forward and asking for advice on the new standards. And certainly I think the approach for it has been very, very positive. There have been people who maybe have had concerns about it, not quite sure of the standards, but certainly where we can, we'll advise people and support them as best we can. Sorry, does that answer your question? Sorry, with regards to fire alarms?
Yeah, you did mention there, though, that you can supply the fire alarms, obviously for a cost. I would have thought you'd be selling them to the public, are you? Or are they free to certain households? And the second part was, when a fire is reported, are you always able to attend? Has there been any restrictions at all because you can't man up to 4 on per appliance in our area?
Home fire safety visits are free of charge, completely free of charge. We are able to supply the new interlinked alarms to certain households in certain circumstances, completely free of charge. There's no we don't charge for our services. With regards the mobilisation, I don't have any specific figures to hand for any stations in the Easter Ross area where they may have been unable to mobilise with a minimum of 4, because that's obviously the minimum standard for firefighter safety and for public safety. We need to have a minimum of 4 firefighters on an appliance with a certain mix of skills. So I'm afraid I don't have any specific figures to hand for any Easter Ross stations at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Paddy. Mike, is that your questions answered? Yeah, okay, good. We don't have any other hands up, Paddy, so there's a few questions today, so you've been let off quite lightly, but I think it's because the report is particularly comprehensive. So thank you. Thank you for coming along. Thank you for your time.
No, thank you very much, Councillor Robertson, and thank you to the members also. Just like to say, first of all, just thanks very much to yourselves as the elected members for supporting us over the years with the SFRS, and also just a note of thanks to local employers as well, particularly with regards to recruitment. I know it is a big ask and a big undertaking for employers to release their staff to undertake RDS duties. So just a quick word of thanks for that as well. But no, thank you for having me along this morning.
Okay, yeah, that is a really good point to thank local employers who are so supportive. You know, it is a big ask, but they are really supportive, and we should all be offering them thanks. So thank you for raising that.
No, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members, moving on to item number 4 in the agenda, which is the Invergarden Firth Proposed Local Development Plan 2. It's on pages 14 to 65 of the report. And we have along Tim Stock, the Principal Planner, Julianne Bain and Douglas Chisholm, both planners, to talk about the report and to answer any questions. There are a number of recommendations, which I'll come to at the end, and I'll read through them at the time to see if members agree. But first of all, I just want to congratulate Tim, Douglas and Julianne on the work that they've done on the consultation, because I noted in the report that they've received the most comments. It's a record total of comments that they've received. They have gone about the consultation in various different ways. So I'd like to congratulate them, because Highland Council does often get accused of not consulting widely enough. Often we do, but it's still not enough. But I think they've very much taken this on board, the team. And it's great to see that we have done a particularly good consultation. So thank you to each of them for doing that. And what I'll do is I'll hand over to the team and let them talk through the report, and then we'll take questions following that.
Okay, thanks, Chair, and good morning, members. This item seeks your approval of the local detail of the new Invergarden Firth Local Development Plan as it affects your wards. I'm joined by Julianne Bain and Douglas Chisholm, who will take you through that local detail soon. But first of all, I'd just like to explain a bit about the plan process and where we are in it. You may remember that we were with you about a year ago when the 5 area committees at that time were at. We sought your approval of the what was called a main issues report, and that was really options. That was development site options in every main village and town, and there were general policy options contained in it as well. At the beginning of this year, we consulted on that between January and April, and we're now reached this point where my red cursor is now. So we're now this is the 4th of the local city committees that we're reporting back to. There's another headquarters E&I committee on the 2nd of December that we're reporting the plan-wide issues back to as well. What we're asking you to do is to consider all the comments we've had on the main issues report and to agree the local detail of the proposed plan. At the beginning of next year, probably at the beginning of March, we will reissue that new proposed plan. This is known as the settled view. So basically, the 6 local city committees and E&I committee on the 2nd of December have been asked to make a choice of sites and policies. So that settled view of the council is then issued in around about March of next year, and that time we invite formal objections. So those who are not happy with the choices that the council has made have a formal opportunity at that point to write in and object. It's an 8-week period over which they'll be able to do that. We will alert everybody who wrote in on the main issues report by email or by a letter informing them of their opportunity to do that at that time. And thereafter, we assemble all of those formal objections, and we inform you of what people have said. But there's no opportunity to change the council's position at that point. We have an opportunity to fine-tune the council's case, i.e. we have to write a paper in support of every site or policy that has been objected to. So there's an opportunity for members and officers to fine-tune the council position, but there's no opportunity to take sites in or out at that point. So that's how the East Ross area fits in, if you like, to the wider plan area. You're at the northern part of it, but as you can see, it covers Nairnshire, Inverness City and area, and a part of the West Ross ward and the Black Isle as well, and the Dingwall and Seaforth wards. These are the main settlements that Julianne and Douglas will take you through the detail of very soon. But as you can see, that there are several. The ones highlighted in yellow are all the main settlements for which there are detailed maps in Appendix 1 of your papers, and you can see there's Alness, Invergarden, Tane, Edmonton, Seaboard Villages, and then there's a list of what we call growing settlements. So these are don't have an identified boundary, but we are supportive of small-scale development within each of these as well. So in terms of the consultation, Section 7 of the covering report asks you to consider and hopefully approve what we're suggesting the new consultation is. And because the previous one on the main issues but worked well, so we've had over 1,400 comments, which is a record for any Highland local development plan. We used a mixture because of the pandemic. We used a mixture of postcards to every household, social media campaign, online videos, both to explain what the plan was about and on how to comment. We've held various Teams and Zoom meetings with local groups as well. Where the community councils were not going to put in a comment, we phoned around to try and ask them to put one in as well. And obviously we had a phone number for people who weren't online as well to request, to have a chat about the plan and for us to send out paper versions of the parts of the plan that they wish to read, and there was an option to put in paper comments as well. So because it worked well last time, we're proposing the same methods this time around, and as I say, it will be an 8-week period that is proposed, and we will consider face-to-face meetings if government guidance next March allows us to do so. Yeah, it's just to make sure that members are aware of the difference between Appendix 1 and Appendix 2 in your papers. Appendix 1 is the local detail. So each local city committee has the power and to sign off or change the local detail. So all of the maps, the detailed settlement and other maps in Appendix 1, each of the local city committees being asked to look at the detail of that and to approve that. Appendix 2 is the front end of the plan. So these are things like general policies on, for example, self build, and we are inviting each local city committee to give their views, so that they can be reported to the Economy and Infrastructure Committee on the 2nd of December if any of the members on this committee wishes to record any views on it. So very briefly, we've reordered the outcomes, put climate change and economic recovery first. The settlement hierarchy, there aren't any changes that affect your wards on that one. We've tried to maximise the overall housing land total. If you've been reading the press, there's the Scottish Government laid before Parliament a national planning framework for last week, and that sets a Highland housing target figure. The figures within Appendix 2 are in line with that. So as I say, happy to take any local city committee views on it, but just be aware that it's the E&I committee on the 2nd of December that has the formal sign-off role for that part of the plan. One thing which you mentioned the last time, which I'm sure you remember, was housing in the countryside hinterland boundary, and members wished that changed within your wards. So because of the council's wider commitment to climate change, and because a freed up approach to development out with town and village boundaries has impacts from a climate change point of view and from a public service cost provision point of view, we did include the hinterland boundary change that you asked for, which is this area hatched in red here. Basically, you wanted the hinterland within both of your wards taken out of the plan. We included that as a non-preferred by officers option within the main issues report that was issued last year. And we've had various comments in on it, which are detailed for you in Appendix 2. I'd have to say the officer recommendation again that's before you is not to make that change. We say of the comments on the hinterland boundary that we have received, which are detailed in Appendix 2, most people said the hinterland boundary should be kept as it is, and not be drawn back, if you like, or not be taken out of your combined wards. Obviously, this is one issue that you may want to record your opinion to the Economy and Infrastructure Committee that you still wish that change to be made or not. But I say that just be aware, please, members, that you're formally being asked to consider the officer the recommendation, which is to not change it. However, it is open to this committee to decide that E&I should formally be asked to consider local members' views if local members' views are still to draw it in. So each local city committee does have the power to decide upon is which sites to earmark for development in each of the main settlement maps that we'll come on to very soon. The list of what acceptable land uses, and you'll see that detail is in Appendix 1 as well. There's also in Appendix 1, there's a green space map for every main settlement. So you're being asked to consider, asked to consider and to approve which sites should be safeguarded from development in each major town and village as well. So those green space maps are available in Appendix 2 as well. There's also an indicative housing capacity for each of the sites we are recommending that you take forward into the next version of the plan. We've given an indicative housing capacity for those as well. And finally, there are placemaking priorities. This is text at the beginning of each major town and village, which again is in Appendix 1, which this is to help decide on planning applications that are not lodged on the zone site. So obviously there will be a lot of single house or other planning applications that come forward within each major town and village, and if there are these placemaking priorities will be what the case officer will use to help determine those applications that are lodged out with any of the actually zone sites. So that's me finished talking. I'll now hand over to Julianne, who will take you through the first of the main settlements, which is Alness.
Thanks. Morning, members. Thanks, members. So Douglas and I will take you through all the settlements in the 2 wards covered by the committee. For the maps, for the series of settlement maps, you will see green ticks and red X's. Green ticks signify sites that we're recommending to take forward, and the red X's are ones that we're recommending not to take forward. Could you zoom back out a little bit, Tim, please?
Okay.
Sorry, there must be a delay, and it's not zoomed out for me. There must be a slight delay in it happening. In your papers, you have your papers anyway, members. In terms of housing sites, we're recommending that we allocate sites at AL02 Willowbank, AL06 Dalmore, 03 and 18 Cross Hills, and AL20 Obsdale Road. These sites are all either being developed, are partially developed, or are available with no major constraints. Other housing land is land at Alness East. Alness East has the ability to continue to deliver housing for Alness in the short to medium term. However, there are concerns about road safety in terms of pedestrian and active travel around existing streets and also with cars using the junction at Roskeen to come on and off the A9. We're recommending that for Allness East, for housing, that we take forward 2 modified sites in the plan. Where Tim is pointing the kind of inset map that Tim is hovering over at the moment, and this is also in your papers as well, members, you will see 2 sites, one outlined in blue and one outlined in red. So these are the 2 modified housing sites that we're recommending to take forward. The site outlined in blue would allow for the delivery of 73 houses, which are the remaining houses that are covered by current extant planning permissions and the associated transport assessment that has been done. The second allocation, which is outlined in red on part of ALO4, would provide for up to an additional 50 units. After these 2 sites would be developed, there would need to be a new revised transport assessment carried out for Allness East. For the rest of Allness East, ALO7 already provides for community use, and we're recommending to continue to allocate that to provide for the continuation of those uses. For the remainder of Allness East, we are recommending that it be continue to be recognised as a potential long-term growth area for the town. However, recognising the constraints with the road infrastructure and the requirement for a new upgraded junction at Roskeen, we're recommending that for the remainder of the land, we keep it within the SCA, within the settlement development area, but not allocated for housing use at this point in time. For the remainder of Allness, to the south of the town, there's a number of active and viable business and industrial tourism retail sites, which we're recommending to continue to take forward as allocations. Can we move on to Evanton, please?
It's on.
Is it on? Sorry,
Yeah,
there must
yeah.
be a delay.
Yeah. Sorry, members, can I just confirm that you can see the Evanton map?
Yes,
Can
we
I
can.
just say though, would it not be better that we can ask questions about each section? Because I'll have forgotten what I want to ask about Allness when you've finished Evanton and Invergarden.
Okay,
Yeah, that's fine, Maxine. We can do it that way. Yeah. Okay,
Thank
I'll
you.
move to you then, Maxine, and you can
Thank
ask your
you.
question.
So sorry interrupting and so sorry being late. Yeah, so I am pleased to hear you talk about the Roskeen Junction and the need for an upgrade, and also about the transport plan that will be needed. So that's what I was going to ask, but you've already preempted that. So the only thing I really actually want to ask is about the AL107 that you said is for community use. Can you kind of tell me what you mean by that, by community use?
Well, in the existing adopted plan, it is allocated for community use, and since then there have been the allotments on the site and there's the playing pitch, so it's recognising that those uses have come forward, and it's there basically to continuate the support of those uses on that part of in that part of Allness East.
Okay, I thought you meant that, but just checking. Thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Loudon, you've got your hand up.
I have, and this one was really for Tim, who spoke before we started looking at individual settlements. It was really in relation to the housing in the countryside hinterland boundary. I see there's 27 comments, but what we don't see there is where were those comments from. And it could be Inverness, it could be up in sort of Tomatin or whatever, and where these comments from Easter Ross or the Black Isle or some of the out of Inverness areas.
Yeah, there was Allness and Ardross. There were certainly at least 2 from your combined wards, and both of those favoured leaving the hinterland boundary as it was and trying to concentrate development within existing village and town boundaries. But yeah, I think that the total number of comments isn't all that high. So yeah, there wasn't a huge amount of interest in it.
Okay, so there was no real groundswell of opinion, and
Either way,
for the areas that we represent, there weren't actually many comments at all. So if we did want to propose that the rollback of the hinterland policy was something that we wanted to see happen, we wouldn't be pushing against a huge groundswell of local opinion that shouldn't happen.
Yeah, as I say, that there haven't been an awful lot of comments, and either for or against a change. So yeah, it's unknown.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Finlayson. You're on mute.
Here we go. As Tim was on the line there with regard to the hinterland, and Derek was asking about it. If you can go back, yes, there was a point that Tim made with regard to the expansion of facilities or services, being able to service these added areas, and the cost to the council to do that. Have you got any idea, Tim, has there been any figures at all that if that expansion to the hinterland was to remain or to be changed, what would any idea estimates what the costs would be to the council?
No, I don't think there's been any detailed figures prepared. It's things like school bus costs, emptying bins. It's these day-to-day measures. It's basically cheaper for the council and other public services to provide a service if you concentrate people within a village or a town. So if it's broadband links, if it's emptying bins, if it's school kids going into class, that there are a wide range of public service functions, so that it's cheaper to provide if you concentrate the people that you need to serve in a certain place.
Yeah, and of course roads and transport and street lighting, I suppose, would be the other thing, would it?
Yes, I think almost every public service function is cheaper to provide if people are all in one place, or several towns.
Yeah. So at this meeting here, do we have the option of proposing something to change there or not?
Yeah, well, sorry. The officer recommendation is to not draw the hinterland boundary in. So you would need to clearly decide soon whether you want to go against the officer recommendation. But as I say, it's the Economy and Infrastructure Committee on the 2nd of December that has the formal say, if you like, on whether the overall hinterland boundary is changed or not. Obviously, it does affect your wards, and I would imagine that the E&I committee would take local members' views into account and would, it might not change the officer recommendation, but yes, I would imagine if all or most of local members wish the change made, then E&I committee, I doubt they would go against that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, what I had proposed, Mike, is at the end, if we decide that we want the members' views, as we've already given them to the officers, to stay in place, then we would put that forward as our recommendation and see if everyone agreed or not. So I'll leave that bit to the end, and then we'll take that forward for both wards. I'll hand back over to Julie if you want to go on about Evington.
Okay, move on to Evington.
Yeah, thank you.
So thanks, Chair. So in Evington, we're recommending that the 2 sites at Tiandallan, so that's EV02 and EV03, we're recommending that they get amalgamated into one site, and that reflects the recent planning permission that was granted for this site, and in fact development has started on the first phase. We're not recommending to allocate land for housing at Kilcairn, so that's EV01 and EV05. Instead, we're recommending that we continue to take forward housing allocations at south of Evington Bridge and at Drummond Farm, so that's EV04 and EV06. And sorry, Tim, up further north, the sites EV07 and EV08, so that's Airfield Road and the industrial estate. We're recommending to retain these as allocations for business and industrial uses. Any comments from members? Questions?
No, there's no hands up. Thank you, Julianne.
Okay, Invergarden, I'll pass to Douglas.
Morning, members. So for Invergarden, as you can see on the screen there, many of the development opportunities, development allocations in the adopted plan remain undeveloped, and essentially we are looking to rationalise some of them, but roll most of them forward, as they still represent these ones are the most effective sites, the most likely to be developed. There is interest in all of them, and yeah, they represent the most sustainable options. They're well integrated within the settlement, and many of them are brownfield sites. So the main focus of housing is at Cromlett, which has a planning application pending for 93 homes, which is also in part brownfield land. Invergarden Mains Farm is seen as the next phase of development, which would take place in Invergarden, and although we're showing a split there between IG08 and IG02, we would essentially just allocate that as one single site. The indicative capacity that we have in the plan just really represents the sort of first phase of development. It's obviously a large area that can accommodate far more than what we envisaged to come forward in the plan period. So there's definite scope there for still significant long-term expansion, and being surrounded by development on 3 sides, we think that's the best location for it. Invergarden is obviously a big employment hub, and we want to continue that to be supported. We've got allocations at the existing industrial estates, which have remaining capacity, along with the harbour itself, and the allocation at the disused fuel tank site. So Atomic Junction still remains a priority, and that's been set out in the placemaking priorities for us to continue working with Transport Scotland to find a suitable solution for it and seek contributions when that scheme is identified. Happy to take any questions on Invergarden.
Okay, thank you, Douglas. Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Fiona. Right, so IG02, because it's quite little, sorry, I'm trying to read it. Yeah, thank you. So that's the current Cromlett site, I think, am I right?
No, it is quite easy to get these confused, but yeah, when Tim scrolls in, IG01, the cursor is, that's the Cromlett site.
So IG02 is part of the Davidson farm, and IG08, that's kind of a secondary, is it, plan B?
Yeah, well, we are just going to the proposal is to allocate the whole of those 2 fields essentially that surround the farm as one allocation. Here we were suggesting the IGO2 be the only allocation, but you know, Invergarden, Cromarty Firth is obviously a focus of renewable energy opportunity. Cromarty Firth is the partnership has several businesses within its partnership based in Invergarden, so we could see significant growth in the area, and we want that to be supported. So rather than just focus on the existing needs, we're allocating the whole of that IG08 and 02 within the plan, but we only anticipate at current build rates that only a certain proportion of it would be built.
Okay, I'm happy with that, and it's all in the same ownership, so it may no need to be purchased at the same time. We'd already looked at that. So IGO4, I'm taking that as the tank farm, Seabank tank farm. So what have you got that allocated for? Because obviously there's talks ongoing about that at the moment.
Yeah, we've everyone will be aware of the tank farm and its the legacy it has in the town, but we're identifying that for housing, business, community, and industry. Okay. It's a really flexible allocation. The Highland Council's housing team were looking at possibly redeveloping certain little components of it in the shorter term, but you know, the Bannerman Group are the owners, so it's working closely with them.
Yeah, no, I'm happy with that. And can you just tell me, final thing, what IG6 and IG07 are?
IG6 and 07, so they're the Cromarty Firth industrial estate. We've got an application pending on IG06 for a anaerobic digester, so that's part, I mean, that's ticks a lot of boxes in terms of reusing waste products from the distillery, creating renewable energy. So, well, part of that may well be developed by the time the plan's adopted, but for now it's it remains undeveloped.
Yeah. No, okay with that, Douglas. And yeah, and the other is just industrial estate. Yeah, I'm happy with all of Invergarden as you've indicated there. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Finlayson.
You're on mute. Oh, you're still on mute, Councillor Finlayson.
Mike, you're on mute.
It's good sometimes when I am on mute, right enough. IG10, IG11 and IG12, these have been taken out of any recommendations, I take it, because they've got a red cross on it. Now, if the boundaries of Invergarden is the white line right round the whole lot, I take it. So if there was a change to the hinterland, would they suddenly become part of a development plan for housing, etc.?
Well, just now they are identified within the hinterland, so there's a presumption against single houses in the countryside other than within small housing groups or where there's, you know, there's a series of exemptions from that policy. But yeah, if the hinterland was removed, there would be a more flexible, permissive approach to single houses in the countryside, essentially.
Yeah, and could it be a development of estates, for example, housing estates?
We wouldn't be looking to support allocation like larger scale developments out with this. As I said, I think the allocations we got in Invergarden satisfy the current and potential demand that may come from the economic activity in the area. Yeah. Unless the sites were unless there was a surge in development and that the allocations were built out, there would be a case for looking elsewhere. But within the planned period, we don't anticipate that to happen, and that's why we've allocated the sites we have. You know, the last plan identified IG 11 and IG 10 with a total capacity of nearly 1,000 units, yet there was only about 30 units delivered on allocated sites during the planned period. So the rate of development has been slow, and I think there's obviously a greater there's activity at Cromlett, and there's been you know, Invergarden Mains has had developer interest. So we hope that there will be development coming soon, but not at the rate that this further expansion is required.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back to when things happened in Easter Ross, Invergarden and Allness. When the smelter came, there was a sudden rush of demand for housing land, and housing estates were built very quickly. And if, by all accounts, from what we hear at some of the meetings we're attending, with regard to hydrogen and various other activities, Invergarden, looks as if Invergarden would may well suddenly come into that sort of category where suddenly we're in a large increase in housing estates.
Yeah, I think sorry, the settlements across the Cromarty Firth region are well placed. I think the plan sets out a positive framework for their growth. Just south from Allness, you know, there's significant expansion there, plus the indicative capacity shown in the plan are for what we expect to be delivered in 10 years, but there's also signs like at Invergarden Mains as well, where further development can happen if need be.
Okay, Councillor Lydon.
I think it's really following up what Mike's been asking about. It's really have all these discussions been had with the Port of Cromarty Firth regarding their proposals and potential development, and are they satisfied that there's plenty space there for anything they might bring forward? And I think going a bit beyond that, if they came to you and said there isn't sufficient space allocated there for what we're planning on doing over the next 5 years, what in what way could you react to that? Would you look again at the areas that are red crossed, or you know, what I wouldn't want to see is if this is a big success story, and rather, as Mike was suggesting, you know, that they wouldn't be capacity constrained in any way.
Yeah, essentially, our local development plans. This one's to be taken forward through the previous legislation, requires us to update it every 5 years. So if there is some surge, we can react to that at the next plan period. There's also the potential that they can come forward, an applicant can come forward with an application that's not in line with the development plan, but if there's a justification there that they set out why some of these sites, the ones, you know, for example, that were previously allocated in the last local development plan but dropped because of a quantitative need, essentially, or a lack of, you know, that could justify support in the future, but we don't anticipate that to happen within this plan period. And there's sites, sorry, like Delny there that got removed. That was based on a single proposal that you know, dissolved essentially as the plan was being produced last turn around, and we've been in contact with Bannerman Group, who own it, and the Opportunity Cromarty Firth, and looking at it from a hydrogen point of view, and you know, we've considered, you know, thoroughly considered the sites we're dropping before making this final position.
Okay, thank you, Douglas. No more hands if you want to continue. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's back to me. Seaboard, has it moved on, Tim? Because mine, yeah, that's
Yes, it has.
Fine.
Yeah.
For Seaboard Villages, we received a very high number of comments for the group of villages, particularly on sites SB05 New Street and on land south of Shore Street, so that's SB02 and 07. For SB05 New Street, we're recommending not to allocate this site. It's considered that it is valued green space and that its development would have a detrimental impact on the character of the village. Land south of Shore Street, so SB02 and 07. The land that is in SB02 is an existing allocation for tourism and housing. We're recommending to retain that allocation, but to extend it slightly south into the land at SB07. So the inset map on your screen, and it's also in your papers, the red line that takes in the existing SB02 and a small section of the northern end of SB07, we're recommending that that would become the new amended allocation for tourism use and up to 5 houses. If you come back out slightly, Tim. Finally, with Seaboard, we are recommending to retain the allocation at SB01, so that's adjacent to the primary school. It's a central site and it also benefits from planning permission. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Julianne.
Okay, and we move on to 10.
It's changed.
That's fine. Thanks, Tim. So the delivery of the 3 to 18 campus has been a long-held aspiration for Tain, and you'll see that we're recommending that the land behind Craighill Primary School, so that's TN01, we're recommending to allocate that as a community use for the campus. It's also for some housing, a small amount of housing down adjacent to the right of to the east, yes, where Tim's right hand is, a small amount of housing on the site there. You will also see that TN02, which is the existing academy site, we're recommending to allocate it for mixed use so that it can be redeveloped in time once the new campus is in place. Members will also see that land to the west of the A9 has also been recommended for allocation for housing. Other sites that we're recommending for housing are at TN03, east of Burgage Drive, Kirksheaf Road, which is next to the cemetery, TN07, and the Grove for 8 units, that's TN14. If you come back out slightly, Tim, land at Blairleith, TN04 and TN05, the land up at the distillery, we're recommending to retain those as important business and industrial land allocations. And members can also note that in their papers there's reference to the extension of the SDA boundary for Tain, so extending it on the land between the railway and the coast, running alongside TN04 and up to the end of TN05. Any questions for Tain?
Doesn't appear to be, Julie. No, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, could I come in?
Oh, yeah, of course, Alistair.
Yeah, I just you know, when you were looking at Invergarden and everything, you were mentioning the people that own the land, and you're in talks with them about this, that, and the next. Looking at the Grove site in Tain, are we in talks with the landowner there of what's going to happen on that site, or persuasion can we put on them to get things moving there?
As far as I am aware that housing colleagues have had some discussions. I think it's going to be an expensive site to develop, and I think from the local development plans point of view, you know, if we're putting it forward as an allocation for housing, which gives it the recognition that it's important for the town for it to be redeveloped, and we've also mentioned it within the placemaking priorities for the town about the importance of it, because it is an eyesore in the centre of the town, is probably as much as we can do. There has been planning permission granted for the site. So, you know, it's if, you know, somebody who can has got the money to be able to develop the site, essentially.
Councillor Loudon or Alistair, would you like to come back on that?
Well, there's nothing more we can say about it, but it's, you know, it is an eyesore, and it's a shame that the council don't have any powers to deal with that eyesore. So I think it will remain like that for a long time to come if we as the council can't instigate any thing against the landowners to do something. Thank you.
Just with regards to that, is there any advice you could give us? Perhaps we also have Mark Rogers here. Anything at all that we can do, any officers we can speak to, other services that we could bring in to try and resolve this?
I wonder if someone could give me a brief potted history of the issue. I'm not wholly familiar with it, and it might help me understand the challenge.
Okay, Alistair, do you want to do that?
I'm happy to chip in.
Okay, Derek.
Basically, it's a large Victorian property behind what was the old post office on the high street. It sits next to the Rose Garden, and essentially it burnt down in a fire. There's been a long period since then. The family have, I think, managed to obtain planning permission for a development on the site, but that, and I don't think that was, you know, a very long time ago that they obtained planning permission. With COVID and things, I would have thought that would have slowed down any efforts they were making to get this site redeveloped. There are issues in regards to trees in a conservation area, and there are issues in regards to the road, which is on the edge of the town. So there are lots of considerations that would normally come into play, but from our point of view, it's an eyesore right in the centre of town, and you know, I think what we want to do is to try and work with the family to see if we can assist them in any way to get this to a resolution, and to have the centre of the town restored to something more in keeping with its place in the middle of a conservation area.
Thanks very much. That was really helpful. I was just trying to collect a few thoughts as you were going through that. I'm sure planning colleagues may also have a few observations they may want to make. I suppose from my perspective, first off, if someone could just pop me the actual address, Derek, if you maybe just email me quickly the address, I'll be happy to sort of share that with other officers and the points that you made. I suppose it would kind of depend. I don't think there's anything wrong in us asking through the appropriate section what their intentions are in relation to the site. But I suppose in terms of actual powers to do anything in relation to the site and the building that's currently on that, that would depend, I suspect, on whether or not it is considered to be statutorily dangerous or otherwise breaches any form of guidance in relation to that. Now, I think I'm looking sort of virtually frantically at Tim here because he might be able to help me. That would either be something through environmental health or private housing enforcement, and or possibly in conjunction with planners in certain circumstances, that kind of approach might be necessary. But I think if you send me that email, the address, I'm more than happy to set the ball rolling on that conversation across the relevant teams and to update members on this, given the sensitivities of the area that you mentioned. Tim, I don't know if you want to chuck anything in on top of what I've just said.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, Mark. There has to be a public health and safety issue for the council to intervene, basically. And yeah, I mean, I think Alistair was hinting at compulsory purchase powers. I mean, one of the key tests of compulsory purchase powers would be whether there's any suitable alternative site or piece of land for that same use. So we as a council tended only to use it for road proposals. It's very rare that we. So if, for example, an affordable housing agency had an interest in that building or site, then it would be very rare and very difficult for us to use the council's compulsory purchase powers to acquire it for an affordable housing use, because we'd have to prove that there wasn't any other suitable site in Tain for that use. So obviously it is very difficult, or would be very difficult, to actually prove that. So yeah, no, I think there are various powers available to the council, but it doesn't really suit a building that is only an eyesore and doesn't pose a health and safety risk.
I wonder then if maybe perhaps the start point for this would be to see if there are ways in which we can work with them, or indeed see if there's any grant assistance or grant funding or any other form of support that could be offered to them in order to assist them with speedily developing out that site consistent with the planning consent that already is in place, from what Derek said, and then to consider subsequent stages of escalation, for want of a better phrase of putting it, should that become necessary. I mean, I take the point about compulsory purchase orders, but we have done that in relation to an old hotel site in Aviemore, for example. So it's not out with the bounds of possibility. But I'm going to suggest to members, and I'm sure you would agree, Tim, that there's likely to be an exceptionally high bar to jump to be able to justify that, particularly in relation to an individual building. As I think the Aviemore example is a valid one, but I think it's something like 4 or 5 houses that were once a terrace knocked together into a hotel, and so that is a slightly different situation. And I think the approach of trying to assist them and at least find out if they are intending to do anything anytime soon, and then ramp it up through various different stages, would be the appropriate one. But I think members, and Derek's got his hand back up again, that I think the first stage probably would be for Tim and I offline just to exchange an email and say, all right, then we've heard what the problem is today. Who do we need to get around the table just to have a wee chat about strategy here? And then once we can pull that together, we can share that back with members here ahead of the next committee, if that's okay. Thank you, Chair.
That's great, Mark. Thank you. That's what I had in mind, was looking to see how we could work with the family to see if there's ways that we can encourage them, support them, and steer them in the direction of potential funding. So it's encouraging for you to say that we make sure that we provide all the support that we can do to try and move it forward. So I like your plan that you'll get together with Tim and look and see if there's anything we can do. Perhaps Helen, our ward manager, can set up a meeting with yourself where we can have a look at this and members can feed into it. So that's a good action from the meeting.
If I could come back in, Fiona,
Yep.
I left my hand up not really to come back in on the issue of the Grove. It wasn't what I was originally going to speak about, but it came up as my hand was up. Yeah, I think there were also issues there with after the property burnt down. There were bats in the trees, who migrated into the building, and then you're in the Bats have more rights than Shona Arthur had to the house. So yeah, there are definitely a few issues there that have slowed things down. But it's great to hear that officers and as Fiona's suggesting, would look to work with the family to bring the development forward and to assist in any way we can. That would be great. But to get off that point, I have one other point, and that's just to mention TN06, where I think there is it's the bottom of the bypass there. Yeah, I think there is a potential interest in the development there, and my understanding from discussions with officers is that the site will remain in the SDA, and that it will be possible to allow a supported development to take place on that site, even if it's given a red cross at this stage. So if that could be confirmed, I'd be happy to support what's proposed.
If I can come in at that point, TN06 is in the existing adopted local development plan, is in as a housing site. We are not recommending to take it forward as a housing allocation in the proposed plan, but we are recommending that the land stays within the SDA, within the settlement development boundary for the town. So this proposal that Councillor Loudon is referring to is one that we were only made aware of not very long ago. So I think with the land remaining within the SDA, if it comes forward as a preferred option for a proposal, what I have been told is that it would potentially be the corner of the site adjacent to the hotel, so where the number 6 is, just to the right of that, a small parcel of land in there. So that land remains within the SDA. If the proposal does come forward on that site, it would be within the settlement boundary, and subject to being able to satisfy all other policies, it would generally be supported within the settlement boundary. So
thanks for that.
Okay, I'll hand back to Julianne or Douglas, who's moving on to the next area.
Yeah, that'll be myself. Thank you. So we have, alongside our main settlements, we have economic development areas. These are typically places that sit out with the main settlements, but are important employment centres which have development potential. So there are two that lie within the committee's area, which is Highland Deephaven and Nigg Energy Park. You'll all be aware that both ports form part of the Opportunity Economic Firth partnership, which aims to capitalise on the area's built and natural assets and really play a pivotal role in the development of offshore wind on the east coast of the UK. So based on those issues, we are proposing to allocate both Highland Deephaven and Nigg Energy Park for industrial uses. Highland Deephaven remains, sorry Tim, just unchanged from the adopted plan. So the boundaries shown on the screen. For Nigg, within the committee papers, the proposal is to retain the boundary as was shown in the main issues report, which is a revision of what was set out in the adopted plan. However, since we've finalised the committee reports, additional information has been made available to us, including a late representation from Highlands and Isles Enterprise, which we've wanted to be included as part of the consideration. It's an addendum that's been made an addendum to the committee item, and it's on the council's website for the public to consider. Essentially, both Malcolm MacLeod, the Executive Chief Officer, and us as Development Plan Officers are of the view that there's sufficient potential and pressures from the energy industry for this area, for the national interest, that justifies change to what we've shown, a revision to the boundary that we put forward in the committee papers, which essentially incorporates both the areas that are in the committee paper, Tim's showing that map on the left-hand side, with merging together with those shown in the adopted plan, shown in purple on the right-hand side, to form one single industrial allocation, leading to a slight overall increase in the amount of land that we would be allocating at NIG. So essentially, whilst the committee report, what was put forward in the committee report, tried to strike a balance between the two proposals for this land, which was industrial expansion and of NIG Yard, and a golf course, which was to be identified on the land close to the shoreline, partly within the industrial allocation that's shown there. We tried to strike a balance which was informed by golf course architects who looked at it and identified what they thought the amount of industrial land that could be accommodated, which wouldn't undermine the viability of a golf course, given that it's a major industrial centre next to leisure and tourism use, essentially. However, as the additional information suggests, and wider reports that have come out, studies that have been completed independent, the latest one by the Scottish Offshore Wind Energy Council, they've identified the Cromarty Firth and NIG in particular being the centre of this renewable energy industry boom that's happening at the moment. It's a critical point in time in that industry, and the likely needs of that industry are essentially on that land by the coast. That's the most attractive to them. In part, that forms part of the attractive land. So, which results in the golf course not being able to be accommodated. So, whilst we thought there could be a position where both could be accommodated, it's fairly apparent that can't take place at this point in time. And what we have is the Opportunity Cromarty Firth vision, which is backed by the council and set out in our National Planning Framework submission and Regional Spatial Strategy submission, which is seeing that the potential from the energy industry for this area can have lasting and significant employment and economic benefits. So where the area has essentially failed to secure manufacturing facilities and fabrication base, this would essentially, the opportunities which have been evidenced in these reports are showing that this is the best place for those facilities to serve these offshore wind projects. Land requirements are a key crucial factor. The components are very large. They're nearly twice the size of onshore wind turbines. So land is a critical issue. The decisions that investment companies are making just now is immediate. The pressures are options are being considered at present, with the first Scotland leasing round announcement expected in January. Investment decisions are being made already. So what we're responding to are those immediate pressures from the industry. A golf course can certainly have benefits. There is support for it. We try to accommodate it, but essentially that will that can still be considered in the future. I think a future plan review, if the industrial development doesn't come ahead, we can certainly look to revise the boundary. But at this present time, the immediate pressures are for supporting that energy industry and capitalising on those opportunities. So yeah, happy to take any questions on that.
Okay, thank you, Douglas. Thanks for doing that very clearly, your proposal there. I'll move to Councillor Loudon, who had his hand up first.
Thanks very much for the report and for the clarity, and also for a clear report of how the change has come about so recently. To the recommendation that's been made. I think really what we're faced with here is a choice between two alternatives, but one of them I think has the potential to develop and to create really well-paid jobs for a significant number of people now and well into the future. This is the renewables industry is going to continue to grow. You know, we've talked the talk last week at COP26 was about a just transition and how we can get from working in the oil and gas industry to the renewables, which are our future, and you know, how do we do that? Creating opportunities for people who may have worked in oil and gas before, or who may be leaving school and looking to have the same opportunities that the people of my generation had when we were leaving school and at the end of the 70s and into the 80s, we had the opportunity to go away and study, or we had the opportunity to stay and get a well-paid job at the Nig Oil Yard. And I think what Global Energy and a variety of partners are trying to do here is to create those kind of opportunities again. Not just for people with university degrees, but for everybody, for all the young people in the local area, a lot of whom have lost hope of having the opportunities that their parents' generation had. And I think this is that kind of opportunity. So this has the support of Scottish Offshore Wind, who see Nig as a facility of national importance. It's not just local importance. It's not just important to Tane and Easter Ross or the Cromarty Firth or Highland region, it's important on a national scale. And I believe that when an opportunity like this comes along, we really have to seize the opportunity that's there. I'm aware that not every development that it's been proposed for NIG has happened or has happened in the way that we expected it to. But what other opportunities are there to create hundreds of well-paid jobs for people living in Tane and Easter Ross and the Cromarty Firth ward? You know, I don't see them out there. I think the opportunities are here, and if the opportunities are here, we should seize them. So I'm supporting the change that's been recommended by the officers, and I thank them for their work in bringing this forward before this committee.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Loudon. Councillor Finlayson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I totally agree with what Derek has been saying there. We in the Cromarty Firth ward there and Tane and Easter Ross, we've been living with development, well, yeah, for the last 50 years, and we must continue to seize the opportunities that are available. As my thought is that there's really of massive benefit to the population in general, in that there'll be well-paid jobs, there'll be ability to keep the youngsters in the area, there'll be people coming back into the area, and I think myself that really it's a rounding off, so to speak, almost of the whole development right along the whole of Cromarty Firth up to Nig. And as Derek said, seize the opportunity, and I certainly do agree with Derek and support what he's saying there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. There's no other hands up. What I would say on this, that it is exciting that there has been the recognition on a national level, as Derek was saying, but also on an international level, of the importance of the Cromarty Firth area and of the Nig area. It's very exciting, it's very encouraging. And it's also been said it's the best place to support the renewable energy projects. And that's really important, and we have to take that into account and recognition of that, and work with all the agencies to ensure that our area reaches the very best potential that it can do, particularly economically. However, it is disappointing that both can't be accommodated. The majority of the local members were very excited about the golf course project and remain so. We've had it explained to us, and it's not just us, but the community too. We've been at meetings where this has been discussed, and people are hugely supportive of it. And that would truly benefit our area too, economically, socially. It would tie in with a lot of the work that we're trying to do to promote the North Coast 500, to encourage and support our hospitality industry, which has really had severe knocks recently. This would certainly help that. So there is great support for the golf course project too. I just find it really sad that we can't support both. I don't know a way forward on that. But I think it's really important. We also need to listen to our communities. We need to listen to our community councils. Now they are just going to hear this the same as us. This is a new proposal that's come forward. So they haven't had the opportunity to make their views known on this. And I think that's massively important. We are elected members. We are elected to represent our constituency. So we have to go back and we have to listen to them. Now there's going to be an 8-week period where you can raise objections, formal complaints can come in, objections can come in against the proposals. So it's before then and during then that we're really going to have to listen to people and see what they have to say on this. So that's really my view, that we go ahead with your recommendations, but we really need to listen to the community, to the groups that are in our community, before any final decisions are made, because it's really important that they have a say on what's been proposed today. It's not just local members' views, it's got to be our community views that are taken forward.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, we fully agree with the community engagement on that, and would welcome as many comments as possible during the consultation period that will begin in early next year.
Okay, there's no other hands to comment on that. Is that the finished going through all elements of the report?
Yes, I believe that was the last slide as well.
Okay, so what I propose to do is run through the recommendations, and that there is one recommendation that certainly I would like to propose a change to. I think probably the majority of members, but we can discuss that, will agree with that. But I'll take your advice on where best to actually slot that in. I'm thinking at recommendation 2 would be the area where we would talk about the hinterland. So if I read through the recommendations, oh, Councillor Finlayson, you've got your hand up.
You're on mute.
Mike, you're on mute.
I continually put it on mute because I've got a dog barking in the background. Sorry about that. You said earlier in the meeting that you'd be asking the members for their opinions to be maybe highlighted with regards to various issues. And there is one I want to ask about, but we'll go, I don't know whether to take it in now or wait till after you talk about the recommendations.
No, I think we better take it in just now, Mike, so that we can see what it is first. It's
a question I would like to ask with regard to the areas that have been allocated for development. At this moment in time, do we have the opportunity in this moment of time to talk about infrastructure and access to the sites? Is that something we can talk about? Because if it is, I'd like to put forward some sort of motion with regard to the Tiandallan Park area in Everton. I will be asking for a new road to be put in from Drummond right across to the river, which would allow a good development in that site. Now I know it's gone to planning and whatever else, but can we put that in as a future development within the next few years? And I'll be looking, if I do put in a motion or whatever it would be, I'll be looking for a seconder to do that. Now, what I'm wondering is this the opportunity to do it or not?
Okay, thank you, Mike. I will hand it over to the officers to give you your opinion on that, their opinion on that. What I would say is it would be great if we could just bring forward motions all the time to put in different roads to different developments. I'm quite sure that we can't actually just do that, but I'll hand it over to the officers to advise.
I'll come in here, Chair. Councillor Finlayson, I'm assuming you're referring to an active travel link, or are you referring to active travel and availability for cars?
I think the dog's got out of the room.
Mike, would you like to come back to Juliana?
Yes, sorry, Julie. What I had a wee bit of to go to one side there. What was it you were saying?
So when you're referring to the link from Tiandallan over to Drummond Farm, are you referring to an active travel link, so a pedestrian and cycling route over that, or is it a road link that you're referring to?
Right, okay. When I was speaking about a road link, which was in a previous plan and was put out for whatever reasons, probably because of the costs, I then concentrated on an active travel whereby we could have a proper bridge across the River Skiach. and that would link up the whole of the rest of the community. Now, I've had a lot of representations with regard to the access through the village to that site, and a lot of concerns with regard to the movement of traffic, and therefore I would be trying to get back to the original thought of having a bridge and road access, but there's nothing to stop having an active travel bit as well. So
I'll come back on that. So you're correct. In the current local development plan for the Tiandallan allocation, there is a developer requirement listed for that link over the river towards Drummond Farm. You're correct in saying that since that there has been planning permission granted for the entire site, and it doesn't include that link. You'll note that in the papers for the placemaking priorities that there is reference to supporting active travel links over the river. So that wouldn't be a link available for cars, but it would be a link available for people to walk and cycle. So primarily thinking about children being able to access the primary school. So as I say, that placemaking priority was been recommended to be inserted into the proposed plan to give some support for that idea for an active travel link.
Okay, thanks so much for that answer. And I would certainly be able to support the active travel part of it, because it's for the children to go to the sports centre and to the school, and for health reasons for people on the walks. So there are many, many walks around Eventon. But if other members were in agreement, is it a question I'm asking, is it feasible for me to put in a motion or an amendment with regard to the road and bridge?
I think what we could do for the allocation is that you could ask for a developer requirement to be included for the site for a road link. Obviously, that would require funding from both, potentially both from, well, primarily from the council and from any developer contributions we'd be able to collect for it. Unfortunately, the houses that are being built in Tiandallan at the moment, you know, the opportunity to collect developer contributions from them towards a new road, that opportunity has passed now. But potentially for any future proposals for houses coming forward in the future, we could ask for developer contributions towards that. So I think the best option is for you to request for a developer requirement to be added against the Tiandallan site. Would that be fair, Tim?
Yeah, certainly.
Okay, Mike, I'll let you come back first on that.
Can I take some sort of advice from my colleague Maxine, see what she thinks?
I think that's very wise, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I kind of think you've missed the boat on this one because of the planning, and the problem was with the planning, it didn't deem it that it needed, you know, that extra road, and I think that's a problem you'll always come up against, that even if you put that you've just said, which I'm happy to support, in the local plan just now, it's pretty weak, and it's pretty much like my wanting developer contributions for Tomic Junction. It's never going to happen, you know. So whilst I'm happy to support you, Mike, don't hold out much hope that it carries much weight, but you know, we can put it in there anyway and just work on it in the future.
Okay.
Councillor Monroe would like to speak as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just about to say virtually the same as Maxine. I'm absolutely happy to support you, Mike. Of course we are. We'd always support you. It's very difficult when it comes to contributions, you know, from builders as well, because sometimes, and I'm talking from, it's really hard because everyone here knows my family connections to builders, so it's really difficult. But when you're talking about contributions from builders, it's really quite difficult because the cost is getting higher and higher and higher as it is, and it's already getting more difficult for builders to make what they used to make on anything. I mean, nobody minds development contributions, of course we don't mind. All I'm trying to say is that we are making them harder and harder and harder. But again, I am still happy to support you, but I just thought I'd let you know how hard it is on the other side of the coin.
Yes,
Yeah.
Can I come back in, Fiona?
Yes, yeah, Mike.
Yeah, I think as Maxine said, there's absolutely no harm in putting that into the local plan. My first priority obviously would be for the after travel, and I can see that there's great possibilities for that, and I think that should go in as a definite. But I think we should resurrect, that's a good Christian word, resurrect what was in the original plan in some way or other, so at least it's is brought to the attention. So primarily it's the active travel, but secondly that we should not lose sight of the fact that a bridge and road link is still needed. Yeah. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. What I'll just add in there is it's really just in support of what Councillor Monroe was saying. You know, you have to be careful sometimes what you wish for and what you put in, because you can discourage developers, and you might have someone come along and want to be interested, but because of that they may then move on to another site. So you have to be, I think, you know, careful and what you actually do put in there, that you don't restrict development. And we've had that in our area before happen. So I think, you know, you have to be wise and consider, is it totally right, and how it's worded as well. But I don't think there's any objections to your proposal, particularly from your ward. So is the wording fine, Julianne? Are you quite happy to include that?
What is in the papers already, in the placemaking priorities for Evanton, there is already a reference to support active travel links over the river. And what we'll do is then, for publication of the proposed plan, where we've worked up all the developer requirements for the sites, for Tyndallen sites, I will make reference to both the active travel link and the aspiration for a road link as well.
Happy with that, Mike?
Yes, delighted. Thank you.
Good. That's excellent. Well done, Mike.
Good. So if I now move on to the recommendations, and I'll read them, and then there is a change to one of them. So the first one is to note the issues raised by respondents to the consultation on local city committee specific matters and agree the recommended responses to these issues, both as detailed at Appendix 1. And then number 2, note the issues raised by respondents to the consultation on strategic matters and officer recommended responses, both as detailed at Appendix 2, and recommend to the Economy and Infrastructure Committee the local city committee's view on these strategic matters. Now, we've already discussed that some members have said that they want to have their views on the hinterland reinstated, you know, in this plan, include the option to contract the housing in the countryside boundary. I'm not sure we'll need to get the wording correct in this, but I think it's also important to note the responses, because as you pointed out, there was 2 in Cromarty Firth and there was none in Tain and Easter Ross. So the overall narrative around it was that there was a lot of responses to this, but in our area there definitely wasn't. So I think the members' views hold for both wards, and that we should include that within this report, but justify why we're saying it too, just so that the committee can see why members still want to hold to that we're not going against our communities in this. So perhaps, Tim, you could let me know what you think about putting that into that recommendation number 2.
That sounds fine. Yes, I think yes. It's obviously the hinterland boundary is considered in Appendix 2. So, yeah, I think the exact formal wording. It would. I think the Easter Ross Committee needs to recommend to the E&I committee that the view of local members is that the hinterland boundary is contracted to exclude, well, to basically bring the boundary back for all of your wards.
Yeah.
So basically taking it back to the Cromarty Firth ward boundary, which is just to the east of Dingwall. So yeah, no, I say that definitely under Roman numeral 2 in the recommendations. Obviously, given what I think members have said on NIG, that would have to be noted in appendix in Roman numeral 1 recommendation, because appendix 1 is as per the previously issued papers. So I think you'd have to, the minute or the note of the meeting would have to clarify, if members are approving the rest of appendix 1, that it's appendix 1 including the change in the boundary that was shown on the slides.
Okay.
But yeah, so happy that you, if all members or most members are agreed that the hinterland boundary should be contracted to exclude any hinterland within your combined wards, then yeah, I think that can be dealt with under that number 2.
Okay, Fiona, can I just check that you're quite happy with that wording? That we take Tim's wording for item number 2 and number 1 as well in relation to NIG.
Yes, that's fine. I've got a note of that. It says noted. Do you need to change that to recommend to the E&I committee rather than just noting it?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. So for 1 and 2, it'll be recommend to E&I committee. Those
well, no,
two.
sorry, one for the appendix 1. It's each local city committee has the power to decide on everything in appendix 1. So there isn't any need to to refer the NIG change to E&I. You are able to decide on that issue.
Okay, so we're just noting the change, in
right.
1, but the second one is the recommendation to the committee. I know, Maxine, you've got your hand up. Are you quite happy, Fiona, with
that? Sounds fine. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so Maxine, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to clarify what Tim said about the hinterland for both wards. I'm unsure about that. Can you repeat that, Tim, please?
Yeah.
Well, I think what most, if not all, members wish is to go back to the position that was shown as a non-preferred option in the main issues report, which was to take the hinterland, draw it right back from the northern bit of the Tyne and Easter Ross ward, and to draw it right back to where you adjoin the Dingwall, Seaforth and the Black Isle wards. So I think what most members are asking is to basically take the hinterland out of your wards completely. So that seems to be what you're asking for, and so yeah, that would be what you would need to recommend to the E&I committee on the 2nd of December.
Sorry, I'm still confused. So when you mean take it out, do you mean remove it from the settlement area so it doesn't exist? So the hinterland would be out with the settlement area for
the hinterland would just cover the Black Isle and the Dingwall and Seaforth wards as it adjoins you. There is a slight problem, and one of the other reasons that we didn't recommend it is that the hinterland was originally drawn in the early 90s to go around every major work centre, and Dornoch is included as well. So if the E&I committee were to take the hinterland out of your wards, there'd be a bit of the hinterland around Dornoch still. So there'd be a gap. That if the E&I committee were to agree with you, then we'd have a hinterland around Inverness and Nairn and Dingwall, and a Dornoch one as well. There'll be a sort of weird hiving off of Dornoch as well. So yeah, it would create a gap. But as I say, it's obviously it's an issue that is relevant to your wards, and it is up to you whether you wish to recommend that all of it is taken out. But basically, it means it would free up the housing of the countryside policy around your wards, towns. So out with the settlement development areas that you've just seen on all those maps. Out with those boundaries, the housing of the countryside would be in favour, i.e. you wouldn't have to have a farming reason for your house, you wouldn't have to round off a housing group, you wouldn't have to meet any of the exceptions.
Okay, good. I get you now. That's what I wanted, but I didn't know if you meant that. I wasn't sure what you're getting at. Absolutely 100% behind that. Yeah, well done, Derek. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Derek, you had your hand up, but you've taken it down, so I'm taking that.
I was popping in to provide some clarification for Maxine.
Okay, we've got it, yeah. So I think all the members, this is what we had originally said to you anyway, certainly in Tain and Easter Ross, all members were in agreement, and that's what we stated we wanted to happen. So that's what we want to revert back to, and the same with Cromarty Firth, it would appear. Okay. So that's the change to recommendation 2. Recommendation 3 is to note that additional supporting documents will accompany the publication of the proposed plan, including those outlined in section 3. 4, to note that minor presentational, typographical and other factual updates and changes will be made by officers, with any material changes to be agreed in consultation and agreement with the chair of the relevant committees prior to publication. 5, in line with government guidance, to agree for the published Inner Moray Firth proposed local development plan to be treated as a material planning consideration in making planning decisions and providing advice. And finally, 6, to agree the approach to consultation outlined in section 7 of the report. So our members all agreed with those recommendations, including the changes that we've suggested. Yep.
Agreed.
Great, thank you. Okay, so thank you very much to the 3 of you for coming along. Again, congratulations on the consultation that you've done, the hard work that you've done, and also with us as well, with local members. You've taken the time to come and speak to us and to explain it all to us, which we really appreciate. So nothing will come as a surprise. So that is good. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye now.
Thanks, members. Bye.
Okay, members, moving on to item number 5 in the report, the Housing Performance Report on pages 66 to 71 of the report. And we have Rory McLeod, the Housing Manager for North, here to highlight any key items from the report and answer any questions that we have. Hello, Rory.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, members. Good morning. You've all got the report in front of you, so I won't read through it in exhaustive detail. I will point out the non-emergency repairs, which continues to be a challenge for us. We expect that to go on as we get through backlogs of repairs that were caused by the COVID lockdowns, and we've had subsequent impacts of material shortage throughout the area as well. But we're working through that and keeping an eye on backlog repairs and reprioritising where necessary. Note that there's been a increase since Q1 in rent arrears in both wards. It's still within the bounds of a relatively broad, stable band. We've got with our staff are working with people who are having trouble with their rents fairly intensively, and have been continually doing that through the lockdown. I think as things ease up, we're conscious of the challenges that are faced by the removal of the £20 uplift in universal credit, and we'll continue to monitor that. I've not included figures for the void relet times. You might have noticed on the report, which is usually there. That's because we didn't have the figures verified in time for the report, but we can update members at a later committee or during board business if they like. Homelessness has after a period of relative stability, has seen a slight increase. That's the figure across from Ross and Cromarty, and pardon me, and it coincides with people being able to move more freely, I guess, as the COVID restrictions start to ease in terms of freedom of movement. I'll leave it to members to ask any questions that you've got now, and happy to answer them as best I can.
Okay, thank you, Rory, again for your very comprehensive report. To look at the figures is always really interesting, to be aware of what's happening in our ward and both our wards. So thank you for explaining that. There doesn't appear to be any hands up at the moment of questions. I think members are quite happy with the explanation that you've given.
Okay. Well, in that case, I'll thank you for your time, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for coming along. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Rory.
Okay, members, the next is item number 6, Ross and Cromarty Educational Trust, on pages 71 to 74. The committee is invited to note the report, and I have Hayley Cameron, the Interim Education Officer for the Mid area here, if members have any questions on this. Or if Hayley wants to highlight anything, she can do so.
Hello. Not really. Hi,
No,
not really. It was just, something that Derek does deal with himself, but obviously with being on annual leave, I could take anything away today that requires any further clarification.
Okay, thank you, Hayley. Thanks for coming along. There doesn't seem to be any questions, so I'll just note the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 7, the proposed award of Cromarty Firth repurposed COVID response funds, on pages 75 to 77. The committee is invited to consider and agree the proposal to allocate £14,750 from the Cromarty Firth reallocated COVID-19 ward discretionary funds to purchase a play, multi-unit and associated surfacing selected by Saltburn and Westwood Community Council representatives in consultation with amenity staff. The unit will be installed and maintained by the amenity service, subject to ongoing maintenance budget being available. Are members happy to accept that recommendation? Is there any questions?
Happy.
Nope. Happy. Okay. It's very happy. It's always really very happy when we can allocate money to projects, and particularly when the community's been involved and they've recommended that they would really like this play equipment, and we can say, okay, here's the money to go ahead and do it. That's one of the best things you want to do.
Great. And they've actually worked so hard, Fiona, this community. They've worked so hard to clean the whole place up, so absolutely well deserved as well.
That's great. Thanks for saying that, Paul. Yeah. That's one of the really good things to do in a committee. Okay. So moving on to item number 8, Tane and Easter Ross place-based funds, proposed funding allocation, which is on pages 78 to 79 of the report. The committee is invited to consider and agree the proposed allocation of £5,000 of Easter Ross place-based funds to Seaboard Memorial Hall to allow the harbour toilet refurbishment to be completed despite the increased costs. Are members happy with that recommendation? Again, another really good item on the agenda, and we're pleased to be able to help that project.
Oh, this is a nice bit, Fiona. Can we not just stay on this nice bit?
This is very good, isn't it? We're just, this is what all the committee should be about.
Absolutely.
Item number 9 is use of Tane and Easter Ross COVID response funds on page 80 and 82. And the committee here is invited to consider and agree the proposal to allocate £10,000 from the remaining Tane and Easter Ross COVID-19 ward discretionary funds to support investment in play in the Tane and Easter Ross ward in consultation with the amenity staff and local communities. And number 2, to note that next steps to progress this work will follow on from upcoming play equipment inspection reports and local communities will require to be involved in discussions around future provision along with the amenity staff. And I think that's really important. The second point, that we really do have to work with our communities in Tain and Easter Ross and look and see what's the best for the future for our play equipment. So are members in support of that?
Oh yeah.
Great. Thank you, Pauline. Thank you all of you. Okay, so moving on to item number 10, the Invergarden Common Good Fund, consultation on the proposal to dispose by sale or lease of Invergarden Town Hall, pages 83 to 86. And the committee is invited to, 1, to note the outcome of the consultation process undertaken as detailed in paragraph 6 below. Number 2, to agree the proposal to dispose by sale or lease of Invergarden Town Hall. And number 3, to note that if agreed, it will be necessary to seek Sheriff Court consent in respect of the disposal. And I have here Sarah Murdoch, who is the Common Good Fund Officer. Sarah, would you like to highlight anything in the report and if there's any questions as well?
Yes, certainly, and good afternoon, members. This is the second consultation, as you're aware, in respect of Invergarden Town Hall. And you've been keeping a very close eye on progress as to what's been going on throughout the various attempts that have been made following the last consultation to find a community group or encourage a community group or enable a community group to be in a position to take over the town hall. This consultation has followed on from the fact that proved unsuccessful, and really we were in a situation of having to make a decision that we have to take the step to look at some form of disposal of the town hall, really in its own interests because of the state the property is coming into. The consultation outcome is detailed in the report. It ran during the course of the public consultation. I didn't receive a single response either for or against it, so that's quite unusual. Sometimes I'll get some sort of general comment, but on this occasion I didn't get a single response, which is why the outcome is really contained only in the report with no appendix or any other breakdown or analysis. There really was nothing received by me to analyse on this occasion. On that basis, really the recommendations are as contained in the report. I think our only issue is that we're not really sure whether it would be interesting to somebody as a purchase or as a lease arrangement, and we would be very much happy to consider what the options are. I considered whether or not it was the type of asset whereby governance might dictate that it had to go to council, but taking into account the increased value in the Invergarden Common Good Fund following the reclassification of the Sir John Gordon bust, I think in the state that the building is at the moment, its current value would be well within 10%, which leaves the governance on the decision today with yourselves, members, as to the way forward. It does have a dedication in the deed for public use. That's sufficient to raise a question of inalienability, so we will need to go to Sheriff Court after any decision made, if the decision today is to go ahead with the proposal. Impossible to give a timescale as to how long that would take. It's entirely dependent on the court processes, and again entirely dependent on whether or not anybody objects. Recent ones where there have been no objection have been start to finish in about 3 months, just to give yourselves an indication as to approximate timescales, but that's entirely down to the court. Once we make that application, we're in their hands then. So there really isn't anything more to add beyond the contents of the report. It's certainly different in reaction to the position we were in when we first consulted on the town hall. But in some respects, maybe it's positive. It's allowing you to make plans that maybe will preserve the town hall in some way in the street for Invergarden. So I'm happy to take any questions, clarify any issues.
Thank you, that's great. So I have Derek, then Pauline, then Mike.
I'll go after the local members.
The local members, good. Okay, thank you, Derek. That's more appropriate. So Pauline first and then Mike.
Oh, geez, oh, the town hall, eh? Here we are again. I think the first time round there was so much outcry, as you know. It was absolutely, everyone was up in arms that we were daring to sell it. And so we thought that we had everything ready to go with them. We tried to help them. We tried to get people in place that they could work with to get the money, you know, secure the funds to get it up and going. Unfortunately, that relationship fell through. I think what happened was reality hit. You know, what we were saying was true. It's going to cost a lot more. It's going to be a lot more work. So the group fragmented and a lot of them went their own way, unfortunately. And I think that's probably why you're not getting so many complaints this time, because I think the reality of what they were trying to do, you know, so many people have tried what they were trying to do, and I don't like to use the word fail because, you know, well, it's what they wanted to do was never going to be viable. I mean, we took business people through to speak to them. We tried all the routes to try and get them to use it for different things. But I just think it's like anything else, you know, you put in the right things, you try to put it in place. And if you don't have the local community people themselves doing it, then inevitably it's going to fall through. We had two very strong ones, but they couldn't do it all. And I think that's where it all fell apart. And now for me, I mean, I don't want, you know, none of us want to see it closed or sold, but our options are so limited, we just can't get anybody else to run it. So even if somebody bought it and did it up, would be far better than to lease it, I think, because if you leased it, it's going to cost so much money to get it to the standard of somebody being able to use it, because it's not in good nick, as you know. The back of the building's not in good nick. We used it throughout COVID for the food bank, which was great. It was brilliant, but it's not. I'm just warning you, it's not in good nick. So if you were to lease it out, I do honestly think it's going to have to be somebody with a lot of money. That would be my only advice. But yeah, that's all I can really say about it. I'm really sorry about it, but that's just unfortunately what's happened. Thank you for letting me speak, Fiona.
Okay, thank you, Pauline. Councillor Finlayson.
Yeah, as Pauline was saying, it's the ongoing saga, I'm afraid. We've discussed this so many times at committees and there's still no real solution to it. It's an iconic building, and I, like Pauline, would hate to see it go. We talked about the problems with regard to service points and stuff like that for Invergarden. That has just reared its head, that there's no real facility there in Invergarden. They've got to go to Allness. And this is just something that's been cropped up recently at the moment. And to look to the community to take it on board and do something or other, that has failed. And it's been such a difficult thing for the community to do. It might be that the council may have to grasp a nettle and look again at how we, as a Highland Council, should be looking at this, whether it's existing buildings amalgamated in the town hall or town place, whatever. I don't know, but I think we're really at the situation now where a decision's got to be made rather reluctantly at today's meeting. And what we were looking at with regard to service points was the possibilities of people getting into the library and having a live link to the place in Allness and stuff like that. Invergarden was the service point that was there opposite the town hall, was really bustling with folk, always in and out, always in and out. So the facility, that would indicate that a facility is needed right in the centre of town there. And we have monies coming forward in various funds that the Scottish Government have produced, and UK Government, there's another raft of money there. And I think it's something we really need to consider with regard to amalgamating our teams. Joss Street Hall, that was another one that was talked about, that perhaps we could amalgamate Joss Street Hall into the town hall area. And so, you know, as I just wanted to make these points. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Councillor Loudon.
Right. Yeah, I read the report with you know, the usual sadness, I think, to see you know, council-owned buildings falling into a state of disrepair is not something that anybody wants to see. But I read the whole of the report, and I see that the Invergarden Common Good has 2 assets. So it has a building which everybody loves but can't be saved, it appears, and it has a bust of Sir John Gordon by Edme Bouchardon,
Yeah.
which is valued at £1.4 million, which I'm not certain would be loved as much as the town hall is. Now the question would be, if the town hall is inalienable, is the £1.4 million bust inalienable, and or might a replica be made of the £1.4 million bust, and the original be sold perhaps to a national museum or some more appreciative destination of Edme Bouchardon's work, and the proceeds used to restore the town hall to a state more in keeping with its importance to the town. So can we have a look at this again? And you know, we've tried to sell it before. Nobody's managed to offload it. We do have a responsibility as a council to look after this property. Is there any possibility that we could realise the value of the bust whilst keeping a copy, and use the proceeds to restore the hall?
Okay, thank you, Derek. I will take in Helen Ross, the ward manager, and Mark Rogers, both got their hands up first, and then we can go back to your question. Okay, so Helen.
Yeah, just a couple of points I would like to pick up. Going back to Sarah's introduction, before we went out for this second consultation about disposal, I did phone the chair of the Invergarden Development Trust, which had formed specifically to try and take the town hall over. She was content that it was time to proceed to a second consultation and look at sale again, because they felt that it simply hadn't been realistic. And I think the fact that, you know, that was a really big trust, was a big response the first time round, but the people who'd responded and come together to try to take it over, I think we're accepting that they had tried. Particularly with COVID, it was a difficult circumstance and it wasn't realistic, and she was supportive of the fact that it wasn't the outcome she'd wanted, but in the circumstances she was supportive that we were going back to look at disposal again. I think just picking up on Councillor Loudon's point, we haven't tried to sell the hall before. We obviously did do the consultation for it before, but because of the response we didn't take that forward. So effectively this will be, we're doing this step again, i.e. coming to members saying, should we consider that? But we haven't actually got to the point of marketing before. And the other point I'd just like to pick up in terms of the Bouchardon bust and the potential to, you know, get money from A and put it to B. Not my area of expertise, but I do understand that it's the kind of thing that the Heritage Lottery and funders like that would take a great interest in, and possibly a bit of a dim view. So it could certainly have impact on the council's ability to pull in funding for other projects. Now, it's not my area of expertise, but that's certainly something that would have to be considered and scoped out.
Thanks, Helen. Mark?
Many thanks. I'm not going to try and pronounce the bust. I think they're about to Derek and Helen's much better French pronunciation than certainly my abilities allow me. I suppose it's Councillor Finlayson's point in relation to what can we do. with the building as a council, and particularly if we're not allowed to sell said bus because it'll upset the lottery, etc., then it's going to come back down to what does the council want to do with this asset. And I suppose I'm speaking here with my asset rationalisation hat on and my responsibility for councils, HRA, council housing and other general fund buildings, but that doesn't include properties that sit on the common good. I suppose the challenge from my perspective, if the question is, do I want to take it over wearing that hat? Candidly, the answer directly is no, I don't. I've got enough assets at the moment that are in poor condition that I need to rationalise. And in terms of where is the council building, then we'd have the question about, again, being quite direct about it. Do we think that that is something that could have been the subject of a bid to the capital programme? Of course it could, because we get lots and lots of bids in. And some of you be aware from the discussions on that. I think the current round of bids is something in excess of £1.5 billion, with about a third of that amount of money available. So the question would be, even if it were a council building, would it be likely to get itself above the line for investment? So there are all those sort of kind of challenges in there. Notwithstanding that, I think Michael makes a good point in relation to service point provision generally. That sits with communities in place, but the building location of it is something that sits with me. I'd be happy to perhaps have a further discussion at some point around service point provision across the area committee, what that looks like, what your ambitions are for that, and what how deliverable those ambitions are. But in terms of it coming across onto the council's general fund, I wouldn't support it simply on the grounds I would not be able to fund it. It would be in the same situation it would be in just now. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Helen, you wanted to come back, and then Derek, you want to come back.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the idea of seeking funding to do the work on the town hall, because obviously the budget required is way beyond the reserves. I have tried over a number of years to pull in other funding. I think twice I've gone into the Regeneration Capital Grant Fund, and certainly got through. I think I was invited to the second stage once. This is actually going back a number of years. And we did, for example, we ran fund days at the town hall to see if we could get people to become friends of Invergarden Town Hall. Because certainly the first time I went for funding, they said that they were interested in the application, but we needed more evidence of community support for it. And we had a great fund day, but unfortunately we couldn't persuade people to sort of sign up as supporters of it. I think people were just a bit nervous about what that might involve, although we'd done that as a kind of light touch way, less scary than asking people to come on a board or that sort. So that there has been quite a lot of work. I'm not saying there aren't other funds to go for, but it certainly is something that we've put a fair bit of time and effort into over the years, probably going back as far as 2014. I think I was probably doing my first funding applications.
Thank you, Helen. Derek?
I'd like Mike to go first, if that's possible.
Yep. Okay, Mike.
Yeah, I know that Helen has done a lot of work in trying to get funding, but since then, just latterly, there's been we've been, since COVID came in, I think it was Maxine that said we're now awash with money, and certainly there's a lot of funds that have been started to come to fruition. For example, the Crown Estates money, the town centre development funds. There's another couple of funds I can't name offhand, which we haven't tapped into, we haven't considered for the townhouse, and it might be that we've reached that stage where we really should be considering these. Another couple of years of the townhouse sitting there, okay, it's in a bad way with maybe a leaking roof or two, but there's an absolute, since what I'm getting at is, because we have now got these new funds coming on board or on stream, another year to try and get extra funding for this, and to really look again at the development of service points and perhaps even the library service into there, and Joss Street into there. I think it's going to be viable to do that, and so I'm looking for a deferral perhaps on the selling of this, but you know, I'll be guided by the rest, other members. Thank you.
Derek?
Yeah, I listened particularly to what Helen was saying on the view of the lottery fund on the possible disposal of the bust. Is the bust on public display? How is the insurance covered? Because I would have thought that insuring a £1.4 million bust wouldn't be an easy thing to do. Invergarden Common Good Fund doesn't seem to have a lot of spare cash, so I'm not certain how that's been covered. But I normally I would be reticent to comment, but if the lottery have expressed an opinion that the sale of this bust would lead to future bids for funding being adversely affected, I think that's something that we might wish to take up with them. It would be a shame if we ended up with a bust which isn't on public display and can't be displayed in the local area, but can't be put to use for the benefit of a facility that the community wish to retain. So you have an asset which is worth 1.4 million, but is worthless, and a worthless asset that the community do want to retain, but are being recommended to dispose of. That this, I'm not a local member, but it does seem that something's not. Something again is not working in the interests of the local community.
Okay, thank you, Derek. Helen.
Thank you. Again, just a couple of points as picking up on the discussion as it goes through. There have been no discussions with the lottery about their view on the sale, but we did some years ago get some advice from Highland when there was some exploration of that. So obviously, as I say, I'm not the expert on that. I'm aware that that's something that would need to be considered, and maybe that's for discussion and with those who are more directly involved. So I was really just flagging that one up. In terms of using other funds to support the work, clearly there are a number of funding sources available at the moment that we haven't previously had at our local disposal, although I know there's quite a lot of ideas already put forward for that. Just to give members a sort of feel for it, I did a grant application in 2017 to refurbish it, and that was included putting a lift in, because of course there's no disabled access up the stairs. It's an old building and those kind of issues weren't considered at the time. So that was over 600,000 to refurb the cinema seats. It's got this lovely little cinema, of course. So again, different schemes would cost different sums of money, but I think you would be certainly looking in that kind of ballpark, and obviously that's now what 4 years ago. So I think those were the main points I wanted to make. But obviously, if members feel that it's premature to consider disposal at this moment, we could perhaps do a little bit more work of some of those things, so that if members decide to retain, it would be a very informed decision, and I would certainly be keen to support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Mark.
It's more a general point, really, that sort of ties across to my experience on the general fund building side of things. It's really nice to be able to get money in from a range of different sources, if that is possible, to refurbish, bring back into use, raise the standard of old historic building. Is something I believe very strongly in, and they have their place and they shape the place that they're in, and they're architecturally important in many situations. But the challenge here isn't just getting the money to pay to fix the building. It's actually the revenue costs attached to that ongoing, about keeping it in a good state of repair so it doesn't land back in the position that we're here discussing it being in today, because for whatever reason, decisions in the past about ongoing maintenance and capital investment in that building have evidently not been taken because it's in the condition that it's in. And that's not a criticism of the common good in any way. This is a picture that I see quite often, frankly, across all of the buildings that fall within my remit. In some cases, there's simply insufficient or no revenue budget funding and or little evidence of prior capital investment. And actually our depots is a really good example of that from a strategic point of view across the piece. So whilst I would love actually to see it come back into constructive use, and ideally if that was community based, all the better, the fact is we've got to make sure in any business plan it's not just the upfront cost of repairing the building and bringing it back to a standard that's taken into account, but that there is a proper assessment of what the ongoing revenue costs are in terms of things like utilities, day-to-day repairs, sinking fund for future capital repairs that are required, etc., etc. And as a common good asset, that would be something that the common good itself, as it currently stands, would have to address from its own resource. Again, if you take up Helen's suggestion, I suspect that would be something that we could look into if members are desiring for us to go away and reconsider these issues before coming back with a final recommendation on it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Mike, you want to come back in?
Yeah, very briefly, I hope. We have a prime example in Tain whereby Derek is really deeply concerned about the old cinema in Tain, and it's rightly so. I think that's good to preserve that building and get it done up. As Helen mentioned, we have that little small cinema in the townhouse in Invergarden. I've been to pantomimes there. I've been to other things there, and very well attended. And if we could follow the example of Derek's there with regard to the cinema in Tain, it might be that we get some way forward in attracting funding along the lines of what he's already achieved with regard to the Tain situation. So I do feel that it can't really be over yet. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for all the discussions. So what we will have to do, you've got the recommendations in front of you. This is obviously wanting a change possibly to the recommendation. Is somebody
Pauline's
wanting
hands up, Fiona, sorry.
Okay, sorry, Pauline, I never seen your hand. You're not on my screen for some reason.
I know, I've had to keep my camera off today because I've got a big dodgy eye.
Well, let's see your big dodgy eye.
No chance. Anyway, no, I was just going to say, yeah, I agree. I do agree with Mike and Derek in that it would be lovely to keep that building. Of course, it would be lovely, but my biggest concern would be what happens after we keep it. We keep it, how do we pay for it? This is a huge building inside. It's freezing. With the heating on, it's freezing. There's lots of concerns. Maybe getting a meeting with Derek to discuss how Derek if you didn't mind, Derek, how Derek managed to do what he's doing and get more advice in that route, down that route before we come to an end. But it does concern me that Invergarden can't afford these big bills that will be coming if we keep it. Sorry to be so moany, but that's just trying to give you
Thank you, Pauline. That's good points that you've made. What we would need is a change to the recommendations. If someone wants to move, a change if they give me the wording that they would like, because you don't obviously want to go, some members may not want to go ahead with item number 2. They agree to dispose. Derek.
Okay, I'd really need the support of the local members, I think. But if the view of the local community is that they would prefer to retain the town hall building and to investigate the prospects of disposing of the bust, and to use the proceeds from the sale of the bust to if possible, to use part of the proceeds of the sale of the bust to match fund the restoration of the building. Would that be a possibility?
Yes, I would be in agreement with Derek there, but I would also like to add that this does not prevent us from investigating new streams of fundings, as well as that particular one that Derek has proposed. Now, I don't know my colleagues in the ward. Where's Maxine? Where's Pauline? I don't know.
Pauline's here. Maxine had to leave the meeting.
Right.
Put it into the chat. Yeah.
No, I'm quite happy to go with that, Mike. Absolutely. I mean, we're not here to get rid of it. We're just here to try and find the best solution. And at the moment, and knowing the history of it, that did seem the best solution was to move it on. And I know I sound mean and I sound hard, but it was just for different reasons. I mean, we have exhausted. Helen's done so much work on this. We've had lots and lots of help on it. But I mean, if we can sell the bust or do something with this bust, great, that would be great. So I'm happy to go along with it and see where we get with it. That would be fine. Yeah, happy.
Okay, so Alistair, Rind.
I don't really want them to feed in it, but what I'll say is Pauline's not been mean, she's not been hard, she's speaking common sense. Speaking common sense, we've got far too many of these buildings going about in our area, and the best way is to seek the private sector. If there's somebody out there in the private sector that could buy that building and restore it to its natural beauty, that would be the best thing for the building. So don't be down on yourself, Pauline. You're talking absolute 100% sense. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alistair. And I would agree, Pauline, you are talking sense. It's not a hard thing you're saying, you're being realistic with your proposal that came from the ward. You do have to look at the future use and maintenance and funding of a building. So I certainly would agree you shouldn't be downing your proposal that came from your ward. It seemed appropriate. We've still got Sarah would like to speak.
Yeah, just to sort of clarify the various points that have come up. This consultation is different in many respects to when we considered the outcome of the last consultation. On the last occasion, we had a very overwhelming drive for the community group to undertake their work. And on that basis, we did make a decision, a recommendation that the proposal should not go ahead on that basis and that the consultation should come to an end. And if we needed to revisit it, we revisited it in the way that we have done on this occasion with a fresh consultation. Interestingly, the Act and the guidance is silent on what you do in a situation that you're in right now, whereby, for instance, you've not had any response from the community. We know the informal feedback that Helen has had from the Development Trust, but we've got nothing in writing within the consultation as such. But you as members don't feel that you've perhaps got enough information from other sources at the moment to make a decision. As it stood on the basis of the consultation, we were very much in the position that we were in before, which is that all investigations on potential funding streams had taken place, but the situation is always evolving. As has been pointed out, there are additional funding streams available, perhaps, that could be considered. There's nothing to stop, although we're not potentially allowed to formally defer a decision as such, there certainly is no reason why you can't make a decision to, or make a recommendation that some additional information needs to be to hand before you can make your decision. So, for instance, investigating additional funding has been suggested, or the various other options that might be available. With regard to the bust, I think that would be a whole different ball game. During the course of the consultation on the asset register, and even before that, the question of the bust popped up on a regular basis. No doubt local members are very aware. In the community, they were very firmly of the view it was common good and not council property. We were finally able to confirm that, in fact, it was common good and not council property, that it should sit on the Invergarden common good account. We certainly had an inquiry on it within the consultation on the asset register. We would have to do a consultation on any proposal to sell it. It would be interesting to see what the community view on that is. I am aware that at the moment it's in secure storage in the Museum and Art Gallery in Inverness. Beyond that, I don't know. And there's been no strategic discussions as to whether or not we should look at whether there's any scope. And I don't know how these things work because I'm not sure how you secure funding. But I mean, you do have this very valuable asset, and it would be a shame if there wasn't some way that we could make it generate some income for the benefit of Invergarden Common Good. It's not to my taste, but I understand it's a world-renowned sculptor, and apparently it's to lots of people's taste. So, and I know it has in the past been out on loan for exhibitions and so forth, but I don't know whether that ever generates any income, or really all that happens is that they pay the insurance for it. So in some respects, you have to get a bit cleverer and a bit smarter, and there's something to be said about looking strategically at the assets that the Common Good has got at Invergarden. They don't have very many. And if it was a case that there was some sort of package or some sort of deal or arrangement that could be put in place that would enable, for instance, the town hall to be refurbed and it stay within Invergarden Common Good, then I think there would have to be some very smart strategic planning for the use of that as an asset for the benefit of the common good. But it is a lot of money that will need to be spent on it to bring it up to scratch. And I think that's the position that we got to is, yes, in some respects, another year won't make any difference. But then what we would have to be sure of is that another year is not going to take it out of the scope or the range of any potential tenant or purchaser. So I would suggest that if you're considering changing the recommendation to 212 to change what you're being asked to do today, that there's some sort of limit on how long it may take to get the information. I would hate to be in a position whereby the town hall becomes unviable for realising in any way as an asset, because that would be worse, I think, for common good. And at the moment, we can't be sure that it's going to be marketable anyway. It all depends what somebody out there would be prepared to do with it. But yeah, that's all I really wanted to clarify. I'm not sure that there were any other points raised that needed any more information from me. It's certainly, you're allowed to request additional information to put yourselves in a position to make a decision if you don't feel happy that you can do that today.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. That was good to explain it in more detail. I think one of the things you have said that's key, and Helen also mentioned it, is that you need a group to actually take this on. So the Picture House in Tain, it's the Tain and District Development Trust who have been working very closely with the group that have the Picture House to raise the funding and to help manage the project. You do need that involvement of the community, the willingness, the dedication, the time, the expertise to get involved to make that difference. And as your officers have pointed out, there hasn't been, that group that's come forward able to do that as of yet. So I would just bear that in mind, local members, when you make your decision. As we said, what we're needing, I'll go to Derek in a minute, what we're needing is someone to bring forward a change to the recommendations. And as Sarah has said, you could recommend that additional information regarding potential funding before disposal is sought, and put in a time frame there, as she's indicated. If someone wants to come forward and make that recommendation and someone else wants to second it, we could do that. Derek, you want to come back in again?
Yeah, I'd like to propose that the sale of the bust is investigated and other potential income streams are investigated. What I'm afraid we're doing here is abrogating ourselves from any responsibility for maintaining the hall, and we can't do that. The Local Government Scotland Act 1973 gave Highland Council, or its predecessor, the responsibility for looking after common good assets. If this asset has been reduced to a state where the only prospect for it is that'd be sold off immediately because it's in such a poor state of repair. How did it get into such a poor state of repair? It's the period since 1975, the councils haven't looked after it because assets outside of Inverness don't appear to be accepted as in any way the duty of the council to look after. And it is our duty to maintain this. I'm assuming it's a listed building. If it's a listed building, we should have maintained it. We haven't. There is another asset which I don't think the community are desperate to retain. If it's possible, can we spend 6 months investigating the chances of raising funds either from the sale of the bust or from other sources? But somebody has to take on that responsibility. Somebody has to do that. The other thing is, Pauline raised and Alistair raised the issue of how do you maintain it after it's been renovated. And again, I think there is a possibility there, which I'm prepared to discuss offline with the local members. But I do think there is a possibility that one of the things that Highland Council is responsible for funding could assist local communities in looking after these assets going forward. So if you're prepared to accept a delay of 6 months to investigate the possibility of selling the bus to maintain the to repair or to match fund any grants awarded to repair the asset, and then we look to how it could be looked after in the long run.
Okay, thank you, Derek. So we've got Mike and Pauline and Mark.
Yeah, Derek speaks a lot of sense there, I think, myself. It's in tune with what I was thinking. And with tongue in cheek, I just wonder how much money was spent in Inverness Townhouse in comparison to what we're looking at here. I know there's a lot of money in their common good fund, but never mind. There's a lot of money spent on it. I know recently Maxine has been putting forward a proposal that Invergarden appoint a project officer, and it has to do with the club up there at the rugby ground is. It's not the rugby club, but it's the social club.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that was a runner. Could we include the town hall in that person's project? And that would alleviate officers from having to spend time on it. I know Helen has spent a stack of time on it, and we don't want to burden her further. So it might be a possibility that we look at that also. Thank you.
Pauline?
Yeah, I'm quite happy with that, Derek, absolutely. And it's not that I'm disagreeing. I think that's a great idea. My only issue with, and it is a shame for Invergarden in a lot of levels, they don't have any wind farm money, they don't have any revenue, anything that they need. I feel really sorry for them, because it's always, they have to come to like the Allness Community Council or the Evington Community Council to get money for what they need to do in Invergarden. It's really, it's not fair. I wish that well, we can't change that. That's just the way it is. We can't change it. I'd love to change it, but we can't. So, you know, and that's why I'm saying that's a worry for me. But if I'm happy to go with what Derek said, absolutely happy to go with it and see where it comes, see where we get. And Mike, we'll speak to Maxine, and if Maxine's happy to do that, then absolutely, because poor Helen has worked her socks off for this hall over many, many years. And this isn't just happened now. This has been happening over years, I have to be honest, you know. So yeah, if we can get the money for what Maxine's looking for, we can include that. I think that might be a good use of the person that Maxine hires. So yes, I'm happy to go with it.
Okay, and finally, Mark.
Many thanks. Do you know, I'm in agreement with almost everything that Derek said in his last contribution, but I also reflect on the points that both Alistair and Pauline made earlier on, and I do agree with them. I do think the sensible thing for us to do is, as I suggested, to take it away for 6 months and to look at the whole costs involved of both doing up the building, but the ongoing revenue costs as well, and to look at what business plan options may or may not be available for that hall, if renovated, to be able to then generate some income to offset that. But the challenge you have in terms of your common good at the minute is if you do it up, you are also responsible, because it's common good fund, for making sure that the ongoing costs are met or the revenue is generated to cover it. And to be very clear, I have no revenue budget whatsoever on my side of the business in terms of general fund buildings to make any payment towards it. And whilst Derek, I completely agree with you in terms of all the comments you made about conditions of buildings and how they've got there, I have to say to you, I don't think there's any chance it would ever get above the capital line in terms of the council's general fund capital projects for a number of years, frankly, because of the condition of the whole rest of the estate. I'm just being equally honest with you, but I think we're all pretty much in agreement, and certainly I would hope Derek would agree with the comments I've made here. If we can help in any way with Helen, for example, in the background, by having a look at what we think those ongoing costs might be, and to help sort of bring that sort of element of clarity to the debate so you're fully informed on it, I'd be more than happy to get people within my team to make those contributions alongside Helen, so that we can come back with something that's properly robust, and so you understand the full liabilities of what you're taking on, not just now, but over the next 20 or 30 years, and indeed leaving as a legacy for your 6 members. Thank you.
Great, Mark, thank you. That's really helpful advice. So going back to what I was saying about the recommendations, we do need someone to come forward with a motion to change the recommendation. We need that wording and somebody to second it.
Okay.
Pauline first. Will I take Pauline first, Derek, because her hand.
That'd be great. She's a local member.
I was just going to say, do you want to go, Mike? Because sorry, Fiona, I jumped in there.
Okay, Mike.
Yeah, I'll put forward the motion. If we can word it along similar terms to what Derek was speaking about there. And also include in the motion the suggestion that we look at a project officer to do both the Invergarden Club and the town hall possible development, because that person can really take that on board. So I don't know how are you going to get that into words.
Okay, can I just move to Helen just now, because you put her hand up, so obviously she's got a comment on what you've said.
I just have a slight concern about the committee making a decision about project officer funding, which is outside of this committee, because that's Maxine with the social club is intending to find funding for a project officer, so that's completely external to us, so it doesn't seem appropriate to have it as part of our decision.
No, that's fine. Yeah. We'll bow to your extra knowledge.
Absolutely, Helen, I would totally agree with that. It's out with her.
Okay, so really take forward the motion then. Have you got a frame of some words there, Derek? If you want to go in my name.
If I put words in your mouth, I think we defer the decision for 6 months to allow investigation of the possibility of selling the bust, and to investigate the possibility of attracting capital funding. And the officers, the council is responsible for maintaining the asset. And so I hope some officer time can be devoted to raising the funds needed to restore the building, but primarily to investigate the possibility of the sale of the bust to provide the funding to restore the building.
Okay, can I just come in there and just urge some caution around saying that? Because as Helen has already pointed out, there will be agencies who will immediately jump on that. I'm sure you'll be contacted, as will local members, about that. People will take that on board as being, you know, a decision. I think I would be very careful about being so specific. You want to look at alternative sources of funding, because that's what you do want to do. You want to investigate all other sources, some that Helen's mentioned as potential. I would recommend that that is how you would word it. Sarah's put her hand up. She might have something to add in there.
Yeah, it's just really to echo that on the question of the bust. I mean, obviously the bust in and of itself, if you wanted to move forward to consider disposal of that, would need to be the subject of a consultation anyway. So it's just about making sure that the wording, as I say, maybe investigate the use or further funding or the use of the bust to secure funding or something that's maybe not quite so direct as sale of the bust, because you don't want to be in that position as far as that's concerned yet, because we don't know what the market for such an antiquity is, where we would be recommended, even if we would be recommended to sell if we considered it. I think it's a lot of advice and looking into. So by all means, the way we could use the bust to raise funding, that's probably a better way of wording it than sale at this stage, because we don't know how viable that is.
Okay, I've got Pauline and then Mark, then I'll go back to you, Derek.
Thanks, Fiona. Could we not just, why do we need to mention any bust or anything like that? Could we not just say that we're looking at different ways of trying to, you know, I mean,
I think that's right.
That's the best advice.
If we're talking about the bust, I know there's a huge tree in Invergarden in the museum there that would absolutely be an uproar if the bust is even mentioned.
Absolutely.
Because there's a museum through there who actually had it there for a little while. They would go mental if they heard the word bust. So I'm just only because Derek might not know the knowledge of the local area. So to me, I wouldn't probably mention the bust. I would just probably say, look, we'd like to defer it because we're looking at other avenues of fund, other, you know, I mean, Mark has said that he's willing to help us to see if there's other routes that we can go down. So we could say something like that, and then we'll come to a decision, because we also have to tell the people that, look, we have to find a way that we're going to fund this later on. You know, people need to know that, you know, we're going to be, if we are ending up responsible for this has to be, you know, an ongoing thing that Mark will hopefully tell the people what it's going to cost, how much we're going to get for it, that kind of thing. Just simple but to the point. You know
I would agree. I would agree with Pauline, and Pauline can put forward that motion. I'll second that.
Okay,
I think there's a wording there.
Wait a minute. Yeah, we'll get to that, Derek. Okay, I'm just going through the list as it is, okay? So I think Pauline's absolutely right, and we have to listen to local members and not mention the bust. Fiona has suggested, would this be appropriate to defer for 6 months to allow investigation of the possibility of alternative sources of funding, which I think looks good, and which was said earlier on by one of the officers. So Mark?
Yeah, I mean, basically, if you're on a stole my thunder, I think that's absolutely correct. I think the advice would be just don't mention the bust, and you can have it as part of your considerations. We're looking into the very things that Fiona's mentioned in her motion. I think that would be advice that's sensible.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, so Mike, are you quite happy for that to be your motion?
As I say, Fiona suggests, I can go as a seconder or a proposer, I don't mind.
Pauline,
what does Pauline want to do?
I couldn't care less. Fiona, you put me like, we're all agreeing, so it doesn't really matter how it goes.
I think Pauline will gather more support than I will in the local deliberations. So put forward as Pauline's motion, and I'll second it.
Happy with that, Pauline?
Perfect. Thank you, Fiona.
Good.
Sorry, Pauline.
That's all right, Mike. I've had a lot worse.
Okay, thank you, Fiona, for your motion in there, and we've agreed on that. Are you quite happy, Fiona?
Yes, thanks. I've got that. That's good. Happy with that. Thank you.
Okay, good. We've got a clear decision on that one. Okay, thank you, members. The other recommendations are fine on that. Okay, moving on to number 11 on the agenda, Invergarden Common Good Fund on pages 87 to 89. The committee is invited to scrutinise and note 1, the Q2 monitoring statement for the Invergarden Common Good Fund, and 2, the current position in relation to the Invergarden Town Hall. Okay, Helen, is there anything you would like to add into there?
No, I don't think anything to add, and the wording of the recommendation doesn't give any issues with the previous motion.
That's what I think. It fits in with our previous motion. Okay, there's no hands up to discuss that, so we're agreed those recommendations. Moving on to item number 12, Tain Common Good Fund on pages 90 to 95. And the committee is invited to 1, scrutinise and note the Q2 monitoring statement, and item 2, consider whether to approve a budget of £20,000 to allow work to be carried out to the Tain Golf Club Road as outlined in section 5 of the report. Members, are we agreed to support both recommendations?
I think Councillor Round had looked at or was going to have a discussion with the roads team on that. I didn't hear the outcome of that. I just wonder whether Councillor Round would like to comment.
Well, if my memory serves me correctly, our area roads manager did send an email out, and he would have had plans drawn up, I think, by the end of September, and then these plans would be given out, for example, to one of our local contractors who was interested in looking at the job. But I don't think that ever happened, because I don't think the plans have been drawn up, but maybe that's wrong.
Okay, so based on that, we're still quite happy to go ahead with the recommendation of a budget. We could say up to 20,000 to allow work to be carried out.
Unless Helen's got a further update for us on where we are.
No, Helen's got her hand up to give us a muscles update, whether she wants to talk about the golf club road.
I think just in terms of the point that Councillor Round picked up about local contractors, my understanding is that the roads manager, once there's budget, he would then put out for 3 prices, and that would include the local contractor who'd likely to be interested, so he'd have an opportunity.
That's fine then. I think that should be agreed.
Okay, that's fine, thank you. So we agree those 2 recommendations, but Helen also has an update to give us on the muscles.
Yeah, this is members are obviously very familiar with the mussels and the issues around them, and will recall that obviously the last tidal and subtidal surveys there was very limited recovery. Sarah Lamb, who's been assisting the Common Good in relation to the mussels, raised the potential for a restoration project to be considered under the Scottish Government's Green Growth Accelerator programme, which I'm sure members are all aware of. It's a really significant long-term programme. So at the moment, there's £1 million supporting pathfinders through the development phase, and the MUS project is eligible to be a part of that, as my understanding. But that Pathfinder stage is about developing a business case and doing research on the best methods to use. So it's an interim stage, and there's no guarantee that it would go forward for the long-term programme brings in funding for 25 years. So it would be really significant. There's no guarantee of that, but it does. The Muscle project does fit in terms of being a Pathfinder project. So I think it's good news. Hopefully it will go on further, and we'll be able to be supported for a restoration project, which would be really exciting for the common good, I think. But it was just to draw members' attention to that.
Thank you, Helen. It's always good to end on good news, and it is very encouraging to hear that. So thank you for that update. Okay, so we've approved the recommendations, which takes us to item number 13, the minutes. And they've just been circulated on pages 96 to 100 of the last committee meeting for members' information. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our meeting. Thank you to everyone for attending.